We're so glad that you could be with us now. And we do want to have this exciting conversation about new frontiers and how we can strengthen participation and accountability alliances for accountable outcomes. So let's go back to Indonesia and Wulandari, who is sharing her experiences of how social audits can help open government and improve services. We'd love to hear how communities can provide data governments don't have, and how does that play out in practice, and what results have you seen? Wulandari, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Hi everyone, my name is Wulandari. I come from Indonesia in the Perkumpulan Initiative. Thank you, Claire, for your question. The community can search for data through participatory research. The community can monitor government programs and public services using accountability tools such as social audit, citizen report card, community scorecard, public expenditure tracking survey, and Perkumpulan Initiative provide technical support to the Indonesian Traditional Fishermen Association, KNTI, small-scale fishing community in the strengthening public accountability for result and knowledge SPARK program. The program supported by International Budget Partnership. In Indonesia, SPARK program supports and leverage public engagement of fisher folk community around access to field subsidy that affect fisher lives as entry point the shaping budget process and outcome. Perkumpulan Initiative and KNTI conducted social audit in 27 regions in Indonesia, involved 7,000 fisher. The auditor represents a fisher folk in the area. And the audit found that 82% cannot access subsidies field due to complicated paper requirements, 93%. The distance for small fishermen to access subsidies fuel oil to fuel station, and recognition by the government, 69%. And Perkumpulan Initiative analyzed the fuel subsidy budget and found the budget credibility problem behind the lack of fuel subsidy access for small-scale fisher. In the last 5 years, period 2016 to 2020, we found that 1.3 billion kiloliters of diesel fuel subsidies, or 1.7 trillion rupiah, were not absorbed by small-scale fishermen. And the average quota for diesel fuel subsidies for the fisher sector for the 2016 to 2020 period is 1.9 million kiloliters per year. However, what was released was only 498,000 kiloliters per year. And simulation in years 2020, the proportion of the realization of the diesel fuel subsidy budget for small-scale fishermen is only 0.3%, or 529 billion of the total subsidy budget of 196.2 trillion. And based on the research to fishermen KNTI, the estimate need for diesel fuel for small-scale fishermen is 4.4 million kiloliters per year, with a budget requirement 2.2 trillion per year. And the result of social audit and budget credibility analysis presented at the national seminar to the government stakeholder, Supreme Audit Institution, Ministry of Marine and Fishery, Ministry of Finance, Oil Company, the Presidential Office, Oil Gas Regulatory Body, and the Supreme Audit Institution. The social audit findings similar with their audit findings. The result of the social audit are useful for the Supreme Audit Institution because Supreme Audit Institution does not conduct inspection on user fishing communities, but only audit government institution. I think that the question and my answer for the how can communities profit data government and how does that play out practice and what result have you seen? Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And so it's, again, exciting to see how you brought 7,000 fisher folk into a social audit process and then complemented that with your analysis of whether budgeted needs had been met and whether the budget had been realized according to the needs that you've identified. So that's and then to see the state actors taking up your findings is really exciting. Thank you so much. Let's now go to Argentina with Francisco. Again, you've had great experiences of bringing together diverse actors in the accountability system to address key programs and services in Argentina, including through the Open Government Partnership, where we've seen interesting commitments to engage citizens in audit planning and follow-up. Can you share more about your approach, Francisco, and what sort of changes you've seen happen?
Yes, thank you, Claire, for the invitation, and hello to all. Yes, in our case, we are sort of regular users of the Supreme Audit Institution civil society spaces. And in that scenario, we tend to work with specific audit recommendations regarding access to human rights, as it works closely on access to human rights. But in this case, I will talk more about the participatory system. And in that scenario, I think that there are the two most important spaces that we had so far were at the beginning and at the end of the audit process. The first of all is a participatory planning. The participatory planning was a consequence of civil society participation, of civil society demands to the Supreme Audit Institution. And now is open to civil society in the broad sense, not only civil society organizations, but also the general public. And the interesting part of that is that it opens on a regular basis, on a yearly basis. And after the civil society presents their own ideas about audit recommendations, then the Supreme Audit Institution in Argentina gives feedback to those proposals. And there we can sort of discuss, let's say, with the Supreme Audit Institution, the capacity of the capacity that the institution has on engaging with audits that are specifically proposals by civil society. Then there is and then at the end, there's a sort of participatory publicity or dissemination of the audits, where the Supreme Audit Institution relies a lot on civil society participation to promote those audits. And in this scenario, it is important for us to work with coalitions of civil society organizations and affected communities, trying to include them with the civil society spaces, trying to include civil society organizations that are not familiar with SAI spaces, with Supreme Audit Institution spaces, and trying to promote their participation in those terms. Specifically, we work with the right to health in this case, and in the right to health, we are trying to work with a diverse coalition of actors. We've been working together for the last 4 or 5 years, and it includes both affected communities, but also experts on different areas such as doctors, biologists, etc., etc. So the group is quite diverse, and in that scenario, our role is important because we try to promote these civil society spaces within the audit institution, but also outside the Supreme Audit Institution. We feel that using the audit recommendations as sort of the guidelines for our work is the key point in moving forward our agendas. And also with the Ministry of Health, but with the Congress Health Commissions, with how budget is allocated. I know we'll talk about this later, but specifically now on what I would say is the more interesting part of the OGP fourth government plan in Argentina that goes from 2019 to 2022. We had an agreement between civil society organizations and the Supreme Audit Institutions that started with a diagnosis, right? and the diagnosis is that there is a limitation for the supreme audit institution, for civil society, and for decision makers to follow up on audit recommendations because of three issues: because of information, because of publicity, and because of the wide variety of the universe of the audits. So the agreement was to create a plan for an implementation of a follow-up mechanism. That follow-up mechanism is quite important because in our case in Argentina, the audit recommendations are not enforceable, are just that, recommendations, and they do not have a follow-up mechanism legally or within Congress. I mean, there's only one commission in Congress that has to follow up all of the audits. And we know that Congress sometimes is not able to work with all of those audits. And because of this lack of enforceability, we feel that this mechanism is key. The mechanism, just for the audience, consisted or consists in three parts. One is the audit training for civil society organizations, with the intention to promote the mechanism and not to limit participation. I will come back at the end of this on this specific point. Then the second one is the creation of a methodology to evaluate the audit implementation. We are currently working on this stage right now. And the last one is to implement an interactive website to guarantee easy access and publicity of audit recommendations. Those are the three parts, and we are really looking forward for the interactive website and to be able to use this. But I will limit myself to these first comments, and thank you for the question again.
Great. No, thanks so much, Felicity. So again, exciting to hear about these clear points that we can all take up as we think about strengthening accountability alliances in our countries and strengthening open government action plans with accountability commitments. So thanks so much. Let's turn to Bakar and Sierra Leone. Again, great examples of a strengthening collaboration across accountability actors and following up on critical issues and services in Sierra Leone. And again, another example of how commitments have been embedded in the open government partnership to follow up on audit recommendations and ensure accountability there. Bakar, can you tell us more about your approach and what sort of results have you seen from this interaction?
Thank you very much, Claire. Firstly, I mean, it's about how do we ensure that citizens are able to relate with the audit recommendations, that the issues raised by the Auditor General are issues that have to do with their livelihood, are issues that have to do with their education, are issues that have to do with their healthcare. So for us, it's about firstly ensuring that the citizens understand that if actions are not taken, it has to deal with them not having the right healthcare facility. It has to do with them not having the required health facility they are supposed to get. So, and in doing this, it's about how do you take, first of all, the citizen along with you, and for them to understand the implication of some of these actions by various government officials. But even apart from that, it has to do with how do you work together with other stakeholders, especially those working on the same sector, so that all of you can come together and strategize and develop action plan in terms of how do you tackle these issues. So it's about how do we bring like-minded institutions along with even state institutions that are allies in terms of what we want to ensure happen. But you know, when you want to engage policy makers, you have to generate the evidence and ensure that those evidence are credible enough so that when you engage them, there will be clear points to make for actions to be taken. And it's also good to also collaborate some of these information with even the state institutions information. For example, the work we are doing in Sierra Leone around WASH in schools. Of course, in the audit report, it has its own percentage, for example, around what number of schools that do not have toilet facilities, for example. So, for example, what we did was, we also look at government-owned data. So clearly compare the two, and interestingly, government-owned data is even more higher in terms of how much of this. So when you bring those data from the audit report and compare with other state institutions and bring it together, it will provide a platform for policymakers to actually sit and listen. For example, when we have a government civil society dialogue, this issue was brought up and the media picked it up. The media put it up as part of their headline. So in what we are also doing, it's also important for the media to understand the implication, for the media to understand why it is necessary for them to report on issues that have to do with the livelihood of the Sierra Leonean, for them to understand the implication of public authorities not addressing audit recommendation. So the media put it on the news, we are front line saying 3,373 schools in Sierra Leone do not have toilet facilities. When the minister first saw it, the minister was like, no, this one is trying to put us back. Not knowing that the information we got was right from the government-owned information itself. So bringing this information and interrogating the government information will help to support the credibility of your advocacies. But in all of this, there need to be that political will in terms of addressing these issues. So for example, like currently what we have just started to work on is to see how political parties can include in the manifesto the need to address audits our recommendation. We did it the last time. The last time what we did was we worked with the media, very closely with the media, and we provide some training for them. So whenever each of the presidential aspirants was on the radio, they would bring the issues around audit recommendations. And then they would ask them questions that if you won the election, what are some of your actions to address these perennial issues? And we saw in some of the manifesto of the political parties wherein they slated what they're going to do to address those issues around their mind, what they said. And that's what now we are following up. For example, the current government in Sierra Leone did mention around issues around strengthening the audit institution. And that's what we are following up. And in fact, when we have the current saga going on in Sierra Leone, where the Auditor General was suspended and the information was not too clear, that's what we use against them, that this is what you said you're going to do, that you are going to strengthen the audit institution, that you are going to ensure that the audit institution is actually independent, both in terms of operational independency, in terms of financial independency. So now we have a base to say, look, this is not what you promised us. You need to go back and reconsider a decision and bring to us what he actually promised us. So for us, these are some of the strategies we employed. But one of the gains we have got is the media are now well enlightened. So once there is an issue, they will not set the agenda. In our own case, the media set agenda for certain political discourse, for certain policy discourse. So once the media now understand this, whatever issue now, they will now put it in context and present it. And that's where now policymakers will start to take actions. And because of some of these actions, we saw, for example, in the 2022 budget that was just laid in Parliament, the government made critical commitments to address the recommendation of the Auditor General's report. And that's what we as CSOs in collaboration with all our partners are now going to use to follow up as part of ensuring that the audit is actually, the recommendation are implemented and that the audit service is both financially independent and operational independent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bakar. Again, great examples of how you've been using data from your visits to the schools to check the water and sanitation, along with the government data themselves and their own commitments, and holding them to account on that. And of course, interesting developments, as you were saying, about the very independence of the audit institution and ensuring that civil society can stand up to protect that accountability institution. So again, really powerful example. Thanks so much. Let's go now to Mr. Dotel, Deputy Auditor General in Nepal. Again, you've been demonstrating commitment to citizen engagement for many years now. And we'd love to hear about your approach. How have you been engaging different actors in the accountability ecosystem, and what changes are you seeing as a result?
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for inviting me in this program. And you have rightly pointed out the issue of engaging accountability actors. There are many accountability actors while designing and implementing the public policy. We have to engage many type of accountability actors. If we talk about the accountability actor, they are ranging from government actors to citizen. Just take an example. There are many regulatory agency, audit bodies, and oversight agency. Those are the government agency which are engaged in promoting accountability. Likewise, there are other agencies also, media, civil society organizations, citizen, and other type of agency, which can be involved or which are involved in shaping public policy and designing as well as the implementing the public policy. Those institutions or those actors plays a vital role in shaping the public policy. Let us take an example of designing the public policy. There are many steps in designing public policy and implementing the public policy. In designing and implementing public policy, we follow the 11-step model. Among the 11 steps, there are 3 steps which directly link to the public. Just identify the subject matter of public policy that comes from the public, that comes from the civil society, that comes from the media. Likewise, while drafting the policy, while discussing the public policy, in each and every stage, public as well as media as well as civil society are engaged, in our case also. And while evaluating the public policy, in terms of evaluating public policy through the audit, also there are many civil society actors are involved. Thus, many actors are involved in designing and implementing the public policy. And another example is implementing and designing the project or program also. While designing the project and program, the demand is initiated from the public. The public gathering will be there, and the demand will be created from the public, and that demand is reflected in the project or program, and that which can be implemented through the government agency. So that in project implementation also, the civil society as well as public are engaged to promote the accountability. And if we talk about the public hearing and social audit and tracking the expenditure, in many cases, different accountability actors involved. In those accountability actors, civil society, public, and media are very much important. And we have several examples that media can play a crucial role while designing and monitoring the public policy, as well as monitoring the budget formulation, as well as budget implementation. They warn the public official. Media warn the public official. They warn to use the public money in effective and efficient manner. We have a good example here. in case of the reconstruction and rehabilitation of work carried out after the earthquake that was happened in 2050. The reconstruction and rehabilitation work was not in progress in the initial stage. At that time, our media and civil society raised this issue. Many times, many media reported those issues. They are following the progress. They are following the cases of relief distribution, as well as grant distribution to the private house, and reconstruction of the archaeological infrastructure. In many times, many media and civil society raise those issues, and after a few years back, the government or the authority take or compel to implement the program or the project by implementing the thing, or by implementing the budget in the right track. So that if we look at now, the reconstruction work was almost completed. It is due to the following up of the progress by the civil society or by the media. So it is a good example that we can take how the media, civil society, citizen or public can warn the public authority to complete the work in the timely manner, or to provide grant in the appropriate parties, and complete the reconstruction work in the timely manner. Likewise, we have another model here. We have another model that is that one is the Hello Sarkar in the federal level, and the Hello Chief Minister is in the provincial level. Those type of application has been were designed, and any public or any civil society can provide or can report grievances to those system, so that government take up those grievances and forward to the respective agency, and those grievances or those anomalies or those irregularity can be resolved. This type of mechanism can promote accountability also. So, likewise, we have the Right to Information Act, as well as the Information Commission is there. Many misprocurement cases has been highlighted by the media and the civil society. By getting information from using the act, many civil society and public can get information using the Right to Information Act, and those things can be reported through the media, so that government official as well as the public official and the government authority become more accountable, and they can work for the people, and they can they have to answer to the public. So that we have a practice of mobilizing different type of actors. I'll come to the audit, how audit institution is mobilizing the civil society. I'll come this matter in the latter stage. However, currently I'm talking that in the overall scenario, in the government level, different actors are involved in the accountability ecosystem, which has a positive impact to complete the work in timely manner, or to become the accountable public officer. So that I think every government need to think about this. That is my answer to your first question. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Mr. Total. Again, really exciting to hear how the public is gathering and sharing their demands that are then shaping your audit programs, and how you've been using technology and to get the grievances of citizens and ensuring that there's a timely response to these grievances. So that's exciting to hear. Many lessons for us, not only in times of crisis, but beyond, of course. So thank you so much. Wulandari, we'd love to come back to you and hear a bit more about what is needed for constructive interplay between civil society and government, and how in Indonesia, and elsewhere, how can we formalize these spaces for engagement? Wulandari, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. In response to social audit findings and KNTI and initiative, the government developed pilot project of subsidies fuel for small-scale fishing using fisher cards. The fisher card is named Kusuka. The team member of pilot project includes KNTI, the Presidential Office, Ministry of Fishery, oil and gas regulatory body, and oil state company. Oil state company in Indonesia, the name is Pertamina. The team regularly meets every month to monitor the progress. We have a schedule for meeting regular for Pertamina and the government, and we share about the problem of fishermen, small fishermen. And then KNTI and Ombudsman signing of MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between Indonesian Traditional Fishermen Association, KNTI, and the Ombudsman to handle complaint related to access to fuel oil subsidies. And this is the complaint mechanism to the Ombudsman to the finding what the problem about the small fishermen. Maybe I think that the output and outcomes for the social audit. Thank you, Claire.
That's great. Again, regular mechanisms for follow-up are so important. So it's great to see how you've established that ongoing dialogue with the key stakeholders and really bringing the voice of the fisher folk around the country to this forum.
It's in regular meeting, Claire. It's the focus group discussion for the presidential staff is the name KSP, and then the Pertamina with the distribution of subsidies fuel oil for fishermen, and many problems in the fishermen. It's the discuss about the meeting. Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Ellen. So again, really important to see how those problems can be discussed and addressed and finding solutions together. No, thank you so much. So Francisco, thank you again for sharing your approach and the different ways that we can be strengthening accountability. I mean, we've been finding that choices regarding the setting of government priorities and spending are too important to be made opaquely and without public input, especially when inequality and perceived corruption are undermining trust in government. So earlier you explained the impact of your work, and we were wondering if you could tell us a bit more about your lessons that we can draw from your experience. Over to you, Francisco.
Thank you, Claire, again. Specifically, I mean, around budget, I think there are some key issues to address. One is transparency of the budget and easy access. For instance, now during 2021, the Congress will discuss next week the budget for next year. And so far, the executive has not yet published the budget law draft. It has been sent to Congress. Civil society organizations, we had access because of our liaison with some Congress parties, but the issue is that the executive has not yet released officially the budget law draft. It has to do with the context that we are living now in Argentina. We have a big agreement to sign with the IMF, and we are very conditioned because of international loans. But however, I mean, nevertheless, the obligation of the government is to present this information and for civil society to discuss. I mean, if we have a big discussion to have around international loans and the next years and what are the conditionalities that the IMF will bring to Argentina, we believe that those discussions should happen with civil society on the table, not only between the executive, not only civil society, I would add opposition parties, the public in general, media, etc., to have a wider democratic discussion around these issues. So one is and the other, I will say two other issues. One is, well, we participate in the IBP Open Budget Survey. That is a key also information that we have and a good way of analyzing our budget transparency, or comparing with international, with other countries. And the third one is we created ourselves. We have our organization has a budget monitor that is accessible for everyone, and it grants access for the public in general, and mostly with people that are not used to dealing with the budget, with very easy graphics and very easy way of accessing the budget. So I think in that scenario, a lesson is that we as civil society need to do everything that we can to promote transparency and easy access to have a more robust discussion around these issues. The second one is the budget analysis. And in that scenario, we try to involve experts on the issue. We try to train other allies that may not used to working with budget analysis on their own specific issues. For instance, now we are having training for environmental issues. We're having training for gender budgeting with gender perspective. And then we have policy papers for decision makers in Congress, but also for civil society organizations. And I think in that scenario, well, we have something that might be interesting for the rest of the civil society organizations here or in general. We have a budget week where we present all of these conclusions. And I think that is interesting for bringing together diverse stakeholders, affected communities, but also Congress that is not usually so close with affected communities and with organizations as well. On that note, I mean, the last thing that I would say is to have advocacy and oversight within Congress and with the executive. Those two issues are key because, as I said, we try to work on budget analysis, and most of the conclusions that we have are in the same direction as the conclusions made by the Supreme Audit Institution. So in that scenario, the conclusions are usually the same, and we try to work with the Congress committees that are in charge of monitoring. I would say enforcing. I said they couldn't. Monitoring Congress, monitoring audit recommendations, and also with specific committees in Congress. I will end up here. I'm sorry I used a minute more than I was allocated. Thank you, Claire, and for the patience.
No, thank you again, Francisco. Really concrete examples of why budget transparency matters and the way that information can be used, and of course how you're bridging the technical, often perceived as technical exercise of a budget analysis with issues that people care about around gender, environment, and of course how you're advocating based on those that data, the information that you've been gathering, but also the alliances and relationships that you've been building. Really important information. Thanks so much. Bakar, again, over to you, in the sense that we've been seeing how much we need that public engagement in order to ensure that money is well spent and that it's reaching the intended citizens that it's supposed to serve. What are some of the lessons that you have been finding from the work that you've been doing on budget engagement, but also strengthening accountability with diverse actors. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And of course, as we all know, the budget is intended to provide services for the people. And mostly the poor and the vulnerable rely more on government services. For example, the rich can take their children to private school, they can take their children to private hospitals, but the poor and the vulnerable mostly rely on this. And therefore, the aspects for let them have a say in what goes into the budget is absolutely critical. But firstly, a country should first of all have the legal framework that promotes citizen participation into the budget process. Of course, when I talk about budget process, I look at the four cycles of the budget process: the formulation, enactment, monitoring, and auditing. So the legal framework should be there, which guarantees citizens the right to participate into this process. So for us in Sierra Leone, we do have the legal framework that provides that opportunity. So that's why we now have many people participating around the budget process. So probably for need for clarity, I may just want to narrow down my talk around how do we get, for example, vulnerable people issues factored into the budget, and how do we ensure that they will actually be used for that particular purpose. You know, the people that can best speak for themselves are the affected people. So therefore, the need to let them understand that the budget is there for them, and it's not the government officials' money, it's the people's money. We should provide services to every Sierra Leonean, irrespective of whatever category you belong, whether you are disabled, whether you are visually impaired. So for us, what has been working is we provide that education to them in terms of understanding what the budget and understanding why they need to participate in the budget. The next thing is about how do we also push them for them to be able to categorize the things that require budgetary allocation, because it's not all of the things that, for example, the poor and the vulnerable needs has to do with the budget. Some are just administrative and policy reform. So it's about, again, ensuring that they understand that these issues, issue A, B, and C, require budgetary allocation for government. And again, providing the space for them to engage directly with those responsible. For example, we engage the vulnerables, various types, the visually impaired, the albino, and all the rest. I mean, we sit with them together, and then they identify all their needs, and we support them to identify what of these needs that actually required government budgetary allocations. And then we provide the space for them to engage directly with those responsible. For example, there was a concern with the aged people in Sierra Leone in terms of not having a budgetary allocation to cater for their needs, since they can no longer work. So we create that platform to them. They engage the Minister of Social Welfare directly. And like I said, now we now have a budget line for the aged people, which we are also monitoring to ensure that that resource is actually distributed to the respective aged home, so that they can be able to have their basic needs. Another example, for example, again, we provide a platform for the albinos. I mean, the albinos need special medication for their skin. And over the years, government has not been procuring those medication. So they've been suffering a lot. So we provide a platform to them to engage with the government, with the Minister of Health, providing the information directly in terms of what they need. I will now see that in the procurement of some of this medicine, there is now some medicine to cater for the skins for the albinos. And again, we did not only stop there. It's about, because putting in the budget is one thing, but how do you ensure that it's actually happened? Again, so we also ensure that we provide that space for them to be asking questions regularly, that there's a budget line for procurement of medicine for the albino skin. What is happening? So that constant follow-up is key. But in all of this, again, we have to build a public pressure. That's where the media comes in. For in everything we do, we include the media. So the media now package this information and bring it to the table and set the public discourse, the agenda. And by doing it, it creates more pressure in as much as the various affected citizens are met with the institution, but again, the media is there to promote the agenda. And at the end, we saw some improvement on that particular aspect. So for us, one critical lesson is, let us create a space for those that are really affected to speak for themselves. They will be able to express themselves more quickly and more clearly. And of course, the aspect of constantly following up. I mean, we've seen quite important, some very good policy, because people are not following up, people are not asking questions. They're going down the drain. So for us, these are some of the lessons we learn around that particular aspect. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you so much, Raka. Again, really important lessons there of bringing in affected communities, creating those platforms, categorizing the needs, and building pressure with the media. And again, really exciting examples from Sierra Leone of using public radio so that you can have that dialogue, so you can engage with high-level stakeholders. So again, really exciting to hear that. We want to go to Monsieur Dotel. Again, you've been actively engaging civil society from audit planning up to audit follow-up. How can accountability actors such as civil society and supreme audit institutions work together to open government, including during budget formulation and oversight? And what are your thoughts about sustaining such efforts? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Again, mostly civil society can be engaged in 4 types of roles. Just first is informing, second one is disseminating, and third one monitoring and advocating. Just take an example for the informing role. Any civil society or a citizen can inform to the public authority, maybe the Supreme Audit Institution, about the cases or about the anomalies that is happening in the project implementation or program implementation, or making the expenditure in the different area of the country. So so that those information can be the asset to the Supreme Audit Institution or the public authority, and they can improve their performance, or they can use that information and report to the public, or they can suggest, or they can warn to the public official. So that is the one role that civil society can collaborate with the Supreme Audit Institution. Another one is the disseminating. As already our colleagues from different countries told that they are also collaborating with Supreme Audit Institution to disseminate the audit finding identified by Supreme Audit Institution. Many issues Supreme Audit Institution can raise, but those issues cannot be reached to the public. In such case, if we use civil society, or if we use media, if we use different type of accountability actor, then these institutions can disseminate audit finding to the public. If they disseminate those findings regularly or frequently, then the respective entity or the audit, the government need to implement those recommendations so that the audit impact will be seen. We have several examples in this case. Just I have already highlighted about the reconstruction and rehabilitation work carried out by the government authority in case of the earthquake. And we have a good example of users committee mobilization also. Many government entity now they are providing instruction that not to use users committee for the purpose of public works. They are instructing to their respective subordinate office. So that this is the good example that we are mobilizing civil society to disseminate the audit result. And they those civil society organization are disseminating media are also disseminating. Then the government authority is accepting the audit recommendation and they are implementing. Likewise, another one is the monitoring. They can civil society can monitor how they are implementing the recommendation, whether they are implementing or not. They can monitor. They can also monitor the activity of public account committee. Sometimes public account committee may also not care the recommendation provided by the Auditor General. At that time, the civil society organization or media can warn the public account committee too, so that the public account committee should accept the recommendation given by the Auditor General, and they have to instruct government agency to implement the recommendation given by the Auditor General. So that in different ways, civil society organization and media and other accountability actors can work together with the Supreme Audit Institution, and that can have the positive impact, and that can have a positive result. Likewise, another role that the civil society can play is the advocacy role. It means they can advocate as a agent or as a partner of the Supreme Audit Institution. They can play the role of Auditor General or the Supreme Audit Institution in a different corner of the country, because in every area Supreme Audit Institution cannot be present, but civil society organization, media, and citizen can be present in each and every corner of the country. At that time, they can advocate the role of the Auditor General, so that the recommendation or observation raised by the Auditor General can be implemented and the accountability can be maintained. So that in this way, the Supreme Audit Institution and the civil society organization can be collaborate. In the modern scenario, nowadays the technology has been developed, and many type of IT solution can be used to mobilize civil society or collaborate with the organization. Just take an example. We are going to developing the mobile application, which is called Citizen Auditor Mobile Application, which can interact with the public or civil society, and we can get many information or audit evidence or videos from the civil society and citizen, which can be used by the Supreme Audit Institution, and those information can be tested and included in the audit report, which help to perform the role of Supreme Audit Institution, as well as they can get our audit observation or our report from our website or mobile application or other type of media. Then they can disseminate those things to the public, and they can warn the public authority, so that the ultimate result is that the audit recommendation will be improved, and accountability can be promoted, and the public money can be used efficiently and effectively, so that the collaboration of the Supreme Audit Institution with the civil society is the best example to promote open government, as well as to promote accountability. Thank you very much, Claire.
Excellent. No, thank you so much for these insights. Again, really concrete ways that we can engage across the budget cycle, the diverse actors in the accountability system. We're getting some great comments and questions and insights, both in the chat and in the Q&A. Please do continue to share those. I'm going to try to tie some of them together as we've received some great questions from government, from civil society, from other actors. So please continue to share those. I want to come back to Wulandari, Francisco, and Bakar. Again, you've shared some of the opportunities, some of the lessons. So what would be some of your concrete recommendations for advancing participatory approaches in the open government agenda? What are some ways that we can bring social movements, CSOs, and public auditors together to really work together in national strategies and national action plans? And then feel free to respond to some of these questions around sort of overcoming some of the challenges. And of course, we've received some concrete questions, which I'll come back to too. But for now, let's go to Wulandari to get your concrete recommendations for how we can strengthen that collaboration, that participatory action for open and better government. Wulandari?
Okay, thank you, Claire. Based on the experience of advocating field oil subsidies for small-scale fishermen, the proposed recommendation is the collaboration with the Supreme Audit Institution to conduct participatory audits by involving the fishing community, starting from the planning, implementation to follow up on audit findings. And two, it's the creating space for discussion with policymakers, to explain the difficulty of small-scale fishermen in accessing field oil subsidies, then explain the result of the social audit with the policymakers and with the government. And three, build a network of civil society organizations that are concerned with the marine fishery issue and budgets to become a part of the pressure group. And then very important, it's the building a media network for the mainstreaming issue of field oil subsidies, small-scale fishermen, and dissemination of audit social result. Maybe it's my recommendation to the collaboration between social movement, GSOs, and public auditors in national strategies. Thank you, Claire.
No, thank you so much. Again, really great examples and concrete recommendations in terms of bringing social audits and the formal audit system together for participatory audits, explaining the results and findings to different stakeholders, building those networks, and building the media power to the network there. That's great. Francisco, over to you. What are some of your recommendations, again, from your experience of really building this into national strategies and national action plans? How can others do so in their countries? And feel free to share your insights. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Wulandari in the sense that involving media is also key, and involving social movements is part of the key issues that are required for bolstering participation, and to actually have a national plan and to have a good strategy to implement. I think mainly on the issue of how can Supreme Audit institutions promote participation. I think, at least in our case, the recommendation for the audits in our case would be that in our case, the Supreme Audit Institution relies a lot in the civil society organization capacity to bring new actors and to bring others. And this role is quite passive in a way. And it's necessary to shift the responsibility to promote these spaces by Supreme Audit institutions. I think that the institution has to sort of own that space, own that responsibility, and make active decisions to try to involve others, not only to rely on civil society organizations. Then the other is to use all the sort of legally granted opportunities for civil society organizations. And as we saw in the open budget survey, there is still resistance to grant participation for civil society organizations during the audit process. We feel that mostly those resistance have to do with institutional tendencies, or with the belief that if they allow for civil society participation, the audit can be sort of it can undermine the legitimacy of the audit if other actors participate, not only the Supreme Audit Institution. And in that scenario, we feel that having the opportunity to participate does not necessarily entail a question of legitimacy to those audits. So it's important that the Supreme Audit Institution grant those spaces and actually allow civil society to participate there. And I think the two more recommendations for Supreme Audit institutions. One is give audits a rights-based approach, not only with SDGs, but I mean, use the SDGs platform, but also give a concrete impact on the rights and what rights are compromised by those audits or by that policy of the government that is not actually being implemented. We feel that the connection between a right-based approach can generate more interest from civil society and society in general. And the last recommendation specifically for Supreme Audit Institution is to collaborate with civil society organizations in their initiatives outside the Supreme Audit Institution, in a way to bring the Supreme Audit Institution to the streets, let's say, to go outside their own building and to go into other agencies of the state, but also they are going to the media and to participate and to try to disseminate their own audit findings and try to, in a way, advocate themselves for the implementation of their own audit recommendations and not rely specifically on civil society organizations. I think that a step forward is something that is required, I would say, in this context for Supreme Audit institutions, and I think that is something that is key and that we are demanding, and it can be part of this monitoring process that I mentioned. But not only that, to let's say go outside and go to the street. I like how it works. So yeah, I think in terms of recommendations for Supreme Audit institutions, that would be all. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I think some of those recommendations obviously are very applicable to a broader set of stakeholders. So how can we bring government to the streets, and not in a confrontational way, but how can we ensure that, that we are listening to communities, that communities have the spaces to come to government and share their concerns, as we've been hearing today about the different platforms that we can build, the different networks that we can build to share those demands, those insights, those needs. So thank you so much, Francisco. We see some great questions here around, and coming to Bakar, around sort of overcoming the challenges of engaging with government. So budget accountability is not easy. We know we all face challenges along the way. How do we overcome those challenges? What are some recommendations there, Bakar? And you also have questions around, as you highlighted, building these issues and the needs that are expressed from citizens into legislative campaigns, into electoral campaigns. So how can others embed these needs and these issues in national strategies and national plans? What are some of your ways of overcoming the challenges and recommendations that you have for others who are interested in strengthening participation and accountability?
Thank you very much. Firstly, some of the challenges are perennial issues, and it requires consistency in following up on these issues. I mean, these are things that cannot be changed in 1, 2, or 3 years. These are issues that need constant engagement. For example, in Sierra Leone, the issues around implementing the audit recommendation has been a perennial issue for the past 10 to 15 years. And then we've seen government out a number of policy statements. But of course, there are different between, these are what we call the rhetorics. What they say is different from what they are actually doing. So it's about how do we ensure that we try to connect, we try to push government, try to mobilize government, try to pressurize government to ensure that what they say they're actually doing it. But in doing all of that, as stated earlier, it requires bringing the public along. And one way to bring the public along is to ensure that the people feel the effect of some of these things in their daily life. How do you create that particular scenario? So for us, what we did was about how do we ensure that we give whatever thing we are doing a human face, so that citizens can see that it's not just, for example, what BAN is doing, it's also about us. It's also about my education. It's also about my livelihood. So that's one aspect. Of course, one challenge, for example, in Sierra Leone we've been facing is how they have attempted to use the legal framework to bypass accountability and transparency. For example, we saw at some point in time back, a bill was taken to Parliament where they say the president should not account for his travel interests. And of course, there's a whole burst of cry, a whole lot of criticism. So if that document should have passed in Parliament, then all resources disbursed to the office of the president as an interest will be unaccountable, and that will dampen the accountability ecosystem. Of course, we saw again, for example, in the case of the COVID-19, a bill was sent to Parliament where they say the two most important documents that guides the financial management of the country, that is the Public Procurement Act and the Public Financial Management Act. There was a proposal sent to Parliament that in the management of COVID funds, these acts should not apply. So which means they'll be doing whatever sort of procurement they want, they will accounting what they want. So an attempt in that one, it might, of course, actually frustrate the whole accountability ecosystem. So for as a way forward, we might want to see countries should be at a look that they should constantly be following up in terms of what's happening at the Parliament. Because if citizens were not well informed, they were actually not following up on what is happening in Parliament to apply pressure. In the case of Sierra Leone, those laws would have been passed. And by now, we'll have seen the implication in terms of lack of accountability and transparency of public funds. For example, the COVID fund. And again, access to detailed and timely information. I mean, there are certain information, if you do not get the details of it and you do not get the time you want it, it will create a whole lot of loss on the side of the citizens. So for us, what we've been doing is how we constantly ensuring that information, public financial management information, are simplified and brought into the public attention so that they can ask questions whenever they need be in that particular sector. And of course, the aspect around the presidential or legislative election campaign, as I mentioned in my earlier presentation, it's about how do you ensure that those issues that have to do with strengthening accountability, strengthening citizen participation, strengthening the aspect of transparency are brought into the political party manifesto. Because when a political party won an election, it is a manifesto now they will not translate into the national agenda, which they will now use the budget to finance to implement. So it's about how do you ensure that you engage the media, engage political parties, and ensure that the issues you want to see factor into the manifesto that brought on board, so that once it is in political party manifesto, it's easy to monitor, it's easy to use it against them. Thank you.
Wow, thanks so much, Bakar. Again, we've heard such fantastic examples of strengthening accountability, bringing in affected communities, building alliances across state and non-state actors, and using the evidence base from both citizen-generated data and government information to hold government to account. And we've heard some great lessons and the importance of ensuring transparency, that documents are provided, that information is provided in a timely manner. Some great examples of budget analysis, the role that CSOs or budget groups can play as intermediaries between citizens and state actors, ensuring that the budget is demystified, that we can share that information, that all the needs around gender, the environment, water and sanitation, fisher folks' access to fuel subsidies, that these issues at the heart of the concerns of citizens are raised and addressed. We've talked about the different platforms that we can use, both enhanced by technology, but also by bringing different stakeholders together in different forums. And that's been a critical aspect of advocacy. And of course, you have emphasized the critical issue of follow-up. We've seen some great comments in the chat here around electoral campaigns, around the OGP process, around ensuring outcomes and with different actors. So please do continue to stay in touch with us, and we're certainly happy to be sharing more from today's experiences. We'll be sharing the resources that our speakers have shared, and we'll have more information to share as well. You're welcome to join our newsletter, of course, too. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all, and to thank our speakers in particular, and everyone who's been involved today to share your experiences, your questions, and your insights. It's a long journey that we're on together, but we are on it together. And we want to thank you so much for all of your insights and your experiences. And thank you to all our participants for being patient with us. And please do continue to share your stories, experiences, and engage with us. Thank you so much to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.